It is my pleasure now, and as I stretch a bit so the guys can rebuild the stage in advance of the speaker after the last session after me, to introduce our 2019 delivery of the Macquarie Lecture, Lachlan Macquarie Lecture. This oration has a fine tradition, first delivered by the Prime Minister Turnbull, followed up next year by Premier Berejiklian. Last year, Professor Peter Shergold, the Chancellor of Western Sydney University, delivered the oration, and three eminent Australians giving very formal, wonderful tribute to Lachlan Macquarie, particularly their vision for Western Sydney. And we thought we'd contemporise it a little bit, with all due respect to everybody who'd gone before, to have Eddie Wu. Most of you know Eddie's story, Eddie Wu, they call him up, Cherrybrook way. Cherrybrook Technology High, maths has never been as sexy as it is in the northwest with Eddie Wu delivers it, I'm told. That Eddie is quite simply a mathematics communications genius. He could be a maths genius for all I know. I don't know. I'm so not a mathematician. It's not funny. Barney Glover is a maths as he's a mathematician by trade. Eddie Wu is a mathematician. Archimedes in the bathtub was more enough for me. But there is in Eddie pure magic in terms of communication. He has taken and done for maths and made it as sexy as possible and for the fun of it aside, literally the amount of kids who've been engaged now not only locally but globally in learning mathematics, and I'm told that's a good thing. I fully concede, not being a mathematician myself, that someone needs to be a mathematician and I need them to be very good at it. And it's like it is very important that we have that sort of genius that can communicate what is often considered a very dry subject and capture the imagination of kids. Eddie grew up near me, North Rocks boy from a Dundas boy. We were stone throws away and a couple of decades apart, but between the two of us we saw some part of the 80s. Yes, 80s, yes, Eddie, good, thank God for that. Growing up there, and then as a public school boy off to James Roos High. I said earlier in the day that my high school was 300 metres away and 300 places on the My School website. And is there more demonstrable difference between Cumberland High and James Roos High than Eddie Wu and me. But out of that, he has built a career not only in educating kids in his classroom and captivating them, their imagination about maths, he's taken it to the world. We often talk about the challenge that technology brings in education these days to keep kids engaged. Well, here's a bloke who worked out the technology was a way to make kids engaged. He's also a proud son of Western Sydney, and I think no one better to call on your behalf to not only receive his copy of Best of the West, which Eddie Wu is. In fact, James Roos is in here, Eddie, I'll let you know. Much to my chagrin, Cumbo never made it, but James Roos did. To call on Eddie to deliver the 2019 Lachlan Macquarie Lecture. It's old school, it's a book, hard copy.
I'll manage. Before I begin, I wish to apologise for the sound of my voice. It's an occupational hazard being someone who works in a school, that there's a funny thing that happens toward the end of term 2 as winter sets in. Students and teachers alike, our respiratory system just absolutely takes a beating. But it's a huge honour. I want to thank Chris and the entire Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue for the invitation to be here and to have this incredible opportunity to give what is my vision for Western Sydney. And being a mathematician, I have a triangular vision for Western Sydney. It's a vision which has 3 facets, 3 sides, 3 directions that I think we as Western Sydney need to move in if we are going to advance in the future. I'm a teacher, so I am of course going to talk about education. I want to talk about the importance of cultivating ingenuity in Western Sydney. I also want to talk about something which may be surprising to many of you, being that I'm a mathematician. I want to talk about the role that creativity and culture have within Western Sydney, and we've had a wonderful segue into that from the previous panel. And I want to close being not just the son of Western Sydney, but also the son of migrants, someone who really keenly and personally is aware of the importance of diversity and importantly connecting the diversity that is so wonderfully existent in Western Sydney. So, cultivate ingenuity, creative industry, and connected diversity. Let's start at the top. It was Greg Whitby earlier today who very quickly referenced this idea of an industrial model of education. And I think that he was exactly on song in talking about this being an outdated way of thinking about how education in schools function in the 21st century. We talk about 21st century skills and often don't remember that we are 20% into the 21st century. If we all agree, if we contend that this is a model which is no longer fit for purpose, then what is the alternative? How can we instead conceive of education if not like this? If not like children being machines that we assemble along a line and add the right components to? Well, thankfully, and Chris did mention this in the beginning, I spent 6 years of my life in an agricultural high school. And as a consequence, the answer, or the alternative to an industrial model, is really evident to me. It's been evident for a long time, despite the fact that I really do not have a green thumb. Simply, instead of an industrial model, a model where we view our children as things to assemble, what I understand from an agricultural background is that living things like plants and orchards cannot be assembled. They can only be grown. I view ingenuity, which is the energy that flows through all of Western Sydney and which will build it into the future. I view ingenuity rather like a seed. You can take this seed, you can provide it with the environment in which to grow, and that is how it succeeds and creates the things that we enjoy. And this is so important in a culture of education where we so much view ourselves thinking about compliance and thinking about improving performance. In fact, you cannot talk to a plant about compliance or improving performance. You cannot command or coerce a plant to grow. All you can do is provide an environment in which it can flourish. And this is what we mean by cultivation. Now, what does this actually look like? What do I mean by this in practice? Well, have a look at my class for a moment. These are the Year 12s who I'm missing from being with because I'm here with you. I wonder what it is that you see when you look at this photograph. When I look at this group of people, I don't see students because they are much more than just people who study. I do not see workers, either present or future, because they are far more than just people who work. These are children, young adults, citizens whom it is my awesome responsibility to look after, support, and to grow, to provide an environment in which they can flourish. Now, it's really important to think about that goal, to address an elephant in the room. It's an elephant that both the UN and our beloved Assessment Curriculum and Reporting Authority here in Australia recognise. It's an elephant you can see in two words in these mission statements, and those two words are all and equitable. When we talk about Western Sydney, this is an image that's been, and a phrase that's been referenced more than once today. When you have a look at an image like this can be disheartening. This can be discouraging. And I don't know if any of you remember when, I believe it was October 2016, probably November, when this image was very widely reported in the media, when the whole phrase of the latte line entered our vernacular. This, of course, is an image of schools across Greater Western Sydney and beyond with regard to their HSC performance. Now, I get why this can look discouraging. It is a picture, in many ways, of inequity. But for me, this is an opportunity and a call to action. In my school, Cherrybrook Technology High School, I'm the head of mathematics, and that means that at the end of every year, I get to choose who it is that I'm going to teach. The class allocations for every staff member within my faculty are completely up to my discretion, including my own classes. And so as a consequence, something I always make sure that I do is I go straight to the Year 10 line. I think about all of the 16 classes in Year 10 that we have at Cherrybrook Technology High School, and I say, which one should I select? Which one shall I make mine? I always choose a class that's in what we call Year 10 5.1. Now, for those of you who are not in a school setting, which is the vast majority of you, let me translate that for you. Year 10 5.1, this is a group of students who do not enjoy mathematics very much. They probably would not be in my class except for the fact that the minimum school leaving age is 17 and they can't quite get their apprenticeship lined up yet. These are people who, for the last 10 years of their life, have been told, you can't achieve in this subject. We're not putting you here as a method of remediation to help you recover. The research shows that's not what happens. We've put you here so that you don't get in the way of other people learning. That's what these children have been told for 10 years of their lives. And I get to say to them, I could have chosen anyone in this school. I chose you. Because I'm not here to take just the best and the brightest. I am here to take them, but I'm also here to look at this image and say, I am, as David Gonski so wonderfully puts it, a builder of society. You know, Lachlan Macquarie, when he looked out into Western Sydney, he did not just see a dry and desolate space. He saw an opportunity for society. He saw a place where seeds could grow and germinate. And for me, thinking about us as Western Sydney, education has to be at the core of how we unlock the potential of our citizens, especially our young people. So, when we think about cultivating ingenuity and growing it, I think we all recognise that while academic competence is a huge part of that, it is not the only part. Alongside competence, we must add creativity. And it was great being preceded by Barney and Lisa, because I am a proud member of the Board of Trustees for the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences. And one of the reasons why I was so excited to accept the invitation to be on this board is because for me, when I think about this icon of Australian culture coming to Western Sydney, what this represents for me is the shattering of that false dichotomy between science and art, between mathematics and creativity. You know, I think we sometimes forget that people who studied the natural world were not always called what they are now. We used to call them once upon a time natural philosophers. And when the polymath, I've got his name right here, and I want to make sure I quote it correctly because someone's going to fact check me. The English polymath, here I have him right there, William Whewell, of course. When he was coining a new title for these people, he elected to go with a portmanteau of science and artist. And that is how we have the scientists that we have today. When I think about mathematics, I know, like I said before, that many of you will look with skepticism and suspicion and say, what does mathematics have to do with creativity? Why, Eddie, do you feel like you have an authority to say anything about this? Well, I don't feel like I have an authority to say this. I'm going to point to other people who have said this. You see, mathematics down the ages has always been viewed as a creative art. And I know that that might seem a bit crazy to us, but let me try and back that with some evidence. When we look out into the world around us, when you look at a Middle Eastern tiling pattern like this, the kind that's found in mosques all around the world and throughout Western Sydney, do you not see creativity? And do you not see mathematics at the same time? These examples, I can literally multiply them when I think about public art displays in New York City. This one's hosted by the Museum of Mathematics based in New York. And when I think about, some of you may be familiar with a Dutch graphic artist, his name was M.C. Escher. He would never have called himself a mathematician. But take just one look at the artworks he created. This is a beautiful hyperbolic tessellation that he hand drew. And you cannot deny the overlap and intersection, the beautiful overlap and intersection between these two things. And what I love about this is it seamlessly illustrates how creativity is about scientific thought and artistic expression, which are the peak of human flourishing. They are the reason we exist to do these things. Now, I'm very conscious of the fact that in a room like this, yes, okay, STEM gets its ride, but of course it does. That's something we've all bought into. It's part of our cultural narrative. But some people are going to say, well, of course, you can go to point to things like that. What about the rest of us? What does in our culture we can grab onto? Well, I went and talked to one of my friends, one of my best friends at my current school. He's the head of English there. And I said to him, why is it that this is a sentence which we make every single student in New South Wales, across Australia, in fact, study? You've studied this sentence too, because of course, who said it? Who wrote it? Thank you. We have some people who appreciate the classics. Now, I had a mixed relationship with Shakespeare when I was at school. I didn't mind Macbeth. I found Othello just kind of crazy and frustrated. Like, why is Iago such an evil man? There's no explanation. He's just a bad guy, okay? What is it about Shakespeare that we continue to be fascinated by? And my head of English said to me very helpfully, he said, well, have a look at a sentence like this. We all universally regard this as a beautiful sentence. I said, why is that? He said, well, and some of you will be familiar with this fact, certainly Bilal, I expect, this sentence was written in something we call iambic pentameter. And I said, really? Iambic pentameter? Why is that such a big deal? And he said, oh, I don't know, but it's very important. This is a real fixture of English literature. And I looked at that phrase, iambic pentameter. I thought, there must be some meaning here that I can dig into. There must be some mathematics. And so I went digging. I found out a few things, and I want to help you come along this journey with me so you can see the importance of creative expression in who we are in Western Sydney. Iambic pentameter, to understand it, you need to understand something called an iamb. My box is going around the wrong spot. You're supposed to include the B there if you want to sound cultural. But an iamb is just a pair of syllables. For example, have a look at the sentence there. Have a look at the third word along for me, would you? And in the quiet of your own mind, I wonder if you could say that word to yourself. Did you say it? Did you notice that out of the two syllables, you stressed one and you didn't stress the other? You stressed the second syllable, didn't you? Because if you stressed the first one and said compare, that'd be a whole different word. That's something else, isn't it? Now, every single pair of syllables that you can see in this line is one of these iambs, an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. Can you count along with me? How many iambs, how many pairs of syllables are there? Hopefully you can count along with me successfully. There are 5. This is why, of course, it's called pentameter. And Shakespeare's genius was that he could not just write in iambic pentameter for one line. Shakespeare could write in pentameter for days. This is 14 lines, all written in perfect iambic pentameter. It's why it has this quality of rolling off the tongue so effortlessly and artistically. And what's marvelous about this poem is that each line is not just written in pentameter itself. There is structure between the lines. Do you notice? I know it's a bit small, it's hard to see at the back. The lines rhyme. And within that rhyming structure, for example, if you have a look at these 4 lines along here, we call this an A-B-A-B. We take these 4 lines and they are called together a quatrain, unsurprisingly, because there's 4 lines. 3 quatrains followed by a couplet. This is what we in English literature call, do you know what it's called? This is called, thank you very much, a sonnet. And this is sonnet number 18, arguably Shakespeare's most famous. Now to me, looking at this beautiful piece of artistic expression and finding mathematics in it does not make it less, it makes it more. And I think embracing this and seeing this as part of our identity in Western Sydney, we are not just industrious and hardworking, but we are also a creative powerhouse, pardon the pun. This, I think, is key to advancing further into the future. So, the 3 directions that we were talking about. Education and learning. This is why I think it's so important that we cultivate, that we grow learners who are ingenious. Creative industry. And all of the exciting plans that we have over the next 5, 10, and 20 years. I'm looking at this angry clock and I feel like I should land the plane. I want to talk lastly about connected diversity. This photo was taken in March last year, and it was in Dubai, where I amazingly was able to represent Australia at something called the Global Teacher Prize. And it was a wonderful privilege to be there among people from the UK, the Netherlands, Hawaii, Spain, all corners of the globe, and to represent what Australian education looks like on that international stage. But whilst I did that, I kept this quiet little secret from everyone whom I met there. And that quiet little secret was, despite standing on this global stage and doing my best not to feel imposter syndrome and saying, yeah, I absolutely belong here, don't I? I had to keep the secret of the fact that I am such a local boy. I have grown up, I was born and raised and still live in Western Sydney, very proudly. That's was my front yard in North Rocks that Chris was alluding to. Now for me, growing up in Western Sydney was a really mixed experience, a little bit like my connection to Shakespeare. It was wonderful that there was such diversity around me, but I could not help but shake the feeling that we have so much more ground to make in taking that diversity and connecting it together. And this was mentioned in earlier panels. I was that minority that was looked at with suspicion, that was looked at as someone who did not have something to offer. And I think that is a tragedy that we fall into over and over again. Seeing and working with young people, I recognize this is something that's part of us. We are suspicious. It's part of that lizard brain, that tribal desire to protect ourselves that we always, every generation, need to relearn how to overcome. And we must do that as Western Sydney. When I think about the power of what it is to be a city in ourselves, I think about this phrase, the strength of weak ties. Could I get a show of hands? Who has heard this phrase before, the strength of weak ties? Is there anyone here? I see one hand, just the one? Oh, amazing, you're all gonna learn something. Okay, let me ask another question. And I expect a few more hands to go up this time. Who has heard the phrase 6 degrees of separation? Is anyone? Yes? Okay, I expect a lot of you. Thank you, hands down. Okay, so you're familiar with this idea that people, despite there being more than 7 billion of us on the planet, I can connect you to any single one of them just by 6 hops of relationship and connection. Now that phrase, that idea, 6 degrees of separation, it came from a sociology paper that was written a couple of decades ago, and the title of that paper was The Strength of Weak Ties. It's all about this idea of social networking, that we all exist within a fabric of relationships, and many of them, as you can see on the screen, are strong ties. Ties of proximity, ties of affinity, people who we spend a lot of time with and we live close to. And so unsurprisingly, we form communities out of these. And they inform who we are, our character, our convictions, and our beliefs. Strong ties have strong importance to us. We know this. It might therefore seem logical to conclude that if strong ties have strong importance, then weak ties to people who are distant from us, ties to people who perhaps you're sitting next to right now but you might not see again for another year, weak ties might seem to have weak importance. But as the title of the paper says, these weak ties, by very virtue of their weakness, have a strength all of their own. When we interconnect with people who are distant to us, when we reach out and grab onto someone who has a different cultural perspective, a different background, a different set of assumptions for why society exists and how it should operate, it's precisely from those people that we have the most to learn. Now, there's a saying, you can take a teacher out of school, but you can't take the school out of the teacher. And unknowingly, you all stepped into my classroom when you entered here after lunch. So to that end, I want to land the plane by giving you an experience, not an explanation, but an experience of the importance of connection. We're going to play a game together. And this game requires you to be slightly unusual and rude and get out your phone. Now, once you get out your phone, and if you don't have one on you, so long as someone nearby you has, preferably someone right next to you, you will be fine. What I'd like you to do is to open up your phone, and if you can find it, if it's within easy reach, just open up whatever app you type notes in. And if you do not know where that is, you've buried it in some folder somewhere, that's okay. Just start texting someone. Just don't actually text them what we're about to write, because they'll be very confused, okay? Now, you've got your phone there, and you've got notes or texting messages open. Somewhere you can type things. This is the important part. Now, with your phone in hand, what I'd like you to do is to pair up with the person beside you. If you're in a row of people where there's an odd number of people, you might need to shuffle a little bit so you're near someone else. And once you are connected, paired up with someone, could I please ask you to nominate one of you to be player 1 and the other person to be player 2. Once you've done so, player 1, could you please raise your hand for me? Player 1, raise your hand. I really love it when 2 people next to each other instantly put their hands up. It's like, okay, we have an argument to settle here. Player 1, I'll know you're ready when half of you have your hands up. So I think we're pretty much there. All right, outstanding, thank you. Player 1, we're actually only going to need your phone. So player 1, hold on to your phone. Player 2, you can put yours away for now. Now, player 1, here is my first instruction for you. It's very, very simple. Just stay with me. I'd like you, please, to think of a whole number between 1 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, or 4, any of them, it's your choice. Once you've chosen that number, it's not a secret, just type it in on the display of your phone. And once you've chosen your number 1, 2, 3, or 4, hand your phone over to player 2. That's all you need to do. Now, player 2, once you have the phone, can I ask you to hold it up so I know you're ready to go? Okay, excellent. Thank you, hands down. Player 2, what you need to do now is run. Okay, quick, you've got their phone. Off you go. Get it on eBay. All right, no. Player 2, what I'd like you to do is very similar to player 1, but with a subtle twist, so just listen carefully, okay? You are also going to think of a number, 1, 2, 3, or 4. But before you just type that number, instead of just typing it, I would like you instead to add your number to whatever number your friend had typed before you. So if your friend types 2, and the number you're thinking of is 3, then what I'd like you to type next is 5. You following with me? Or whatever, of course, your numbers are, unless those are your numbers, okay? So now on the phone display, there should be 2 numbers, and what I'd like you to do is hand the phone back to the anxious owner. Player 1, you've got your phone back. Now, we pretty much that's as complex as this game gets, okay? Player 1, you're going to do the same thing. You're always picking a number between 1 and 4. You're not locked into the same number you chose at the beginning. You can choose a new one. Or if you'd like to intimidate the person next to you, I hear it'll really psych them out if you just throw the same number at them again and again. I'll leave that choice up to you. But you're always choosing a number and then adding it on. This is the key thing, okay? Now, in the next 1 minute and 56 seconds, you're going to play this game back and forth. But there's one last rule you need to know, and arguably it's the most important rule, because it's the rule that tells you how to win. The astute among you will have noticed that this game has a name. It's called the game of 23. Very good. The reason why it's called that is because eventually one of you will be able to type the number 23, and that person is the winner. Do you understand the premise? Okay, good. You've got a short amount of time left. Good luck, off you go. Wave me over if your game finishes, okay? Good luck. All right, so if I keep on talking much longer, I'm going to turn into a pumpkin on stage. So I'd better close. Now, I did not just play this game with you for the sake of playing a game. I mean, I did play it for the sake of playing a game, but there was actually something important to learn here, and it's all about this theme of connecting through diversity. When you played this game, I want you to have a look at your phone on which you played the game, and I'd love you to have a look at the numbers that you typed as you played it, unless, of course, you lost and you angrily deleted all the numbers. That does happen, okay? But for the rest of you, I'm going to ask you a simple question on the basis of the numbers that you typed. Here's the question. When you look at the numbers, please raise your hand if, at any stage during the game, your opponent, the person you're playing against, if they ever type the number 18. Would you please raise your hand if this happened to you? Hands up if your opponent typed 18. Hands up straight. Okay, it's about a third of the room. Thank you, about what I expected. Hands down. If this didn't happen to you, I'd just like you to imagine if this happened, okay? Your friend has typed 18 and they've handed the phone to you. And then for the rest of you who did raise your hands, I'm just going to make a prediction as to what happened next. Your friend typed the number 18, they handed the phone to you, and then you received the phone, and you were about to type the next number. And then you paused. And then the next thing you said was, Linda, I don't want to play this game anymore with you. Because you've realized, haven't you, that even though according to the rules of the game is not finished, but the game is over, isn't it? Because no matter what number you choose next, you're going to lose, they're going to win. Now, what you've discovered is that when I introduce this game to you, I was lying. This is not the game of 23, is it? It is in fact the game of 18. Whoever gets to 18, they are the real winner. Now, I leave this is the way mathematicians say it, I leave it as an exercise to the reader for you to see if you can work out that since the game of 23 is not really about 23, is it? It's really about 18. Doesn't it stand to reason that the game of 18 is not about 18 either? I'll let you try and work that one out for yourself. You didn't expect to come here and get homework, but you just did, okay? Now, when I think about Western Sydney and the vision of where we can go in the future, I'm tremendously excited and I'm tremendously filled with hope. But only if we can seize the centrality of learning and education in cultivating ingenuity in our young people and in the leaders of tomorrow. Only if we can see that between creativity, scientific thinking and industry, there is no contradiction between these things. We must see them all together. And lastly, only if we can actually take the wonderful diversity that is here in Western Sydney and actually connect it. That is where you learn something about this game, when you're willing to work alongside someone else even when they beat you. That's my vision for Western Sydney. Thank you so much.